What is up, Unplugged family? What is up, YouTube? You want to join the family? Smash the subscribe button. After you watch the video, obviously, there will be more than plenty of reasons why you would want to hang around and join the Unplugged family. Anyway, today we're going to talk about why I am ditching my M1 Mac Mini for the M1 MacBook Pro 13-inch. Now, let's be clear. I'm ditching it, but I'm not like getting rid of the M1 Mac Mini. M1 Mac Mini, as you guys have seen in my previous videos, I've sung the praises of it over and over. So it's being moved into a different use within the studio. And the M1 MacBook Pro 13-inch has taken over as my main editing machine. This is just a base model, the cheapest one that you can buy. And to be honest, right now you can find this one on sale. So you're getting refurb pricing for brand new, which is an absolute steal and killer deal. Now, listen, I know you just seen nothing but M1 fandom across YouTube. There's a reason for that. So we're gonna talk about that and exactly why this M1 MacBook Pro 13-inch could probably service your needs more than the M1 Mac Mini and a lot of the pros this has over a M1 Mac Mini. So let's get into it, let's talk about it. I'm just gonna have an open and honest, raw conversation with you guys and kind of share my thoughts, my movement, and just my overall use. So if you guys don't know, initially when the M1 released 9 months ago, I grabbed the MacBook Pro 13-inch and the M1 Mac Mini. Now, at that time, I had just recently come off a fresh purchase of the MacBook Pro 13-inch Intel base, spec'd out, spent well over $3,000 for that machine. So getting word of the M1 and what it was capable of, I won't lie, I was salty because I had just spent a major bag with Apple. And then they dropped this silicon-based chipset, which just obliterates Intel-based Macs. Now, I did a video back then, which I think I've unlisted since, where I was comparing export times from the MacBook Pro 16-inch to this M1 13-inch. And you know, the 13-inch did not beat this time, but it was very close. It was neck and neck. At that time, I was salty. I'm gonna keep it a buck. Like, wouldn't you be if you just spent over $3,300, $500, whatever dollars on a brand new MacBook Pro, only to find out months later they release something that can kick that MacBook Pro's butt for like a third of the price. But I did keep the M1 Mac Mini over all of this time to experience the M1, and then eventually I switched all editing from that MacBook Pro 16-inch Intel base and my iMac Pro, that's another story we could talk about, it's the same boat, into just doing all M1. So I hooked up the M1 Mac Mini, I was doing everything on it. It was my main setup until now, which is the reason why I have this M1 MacBook Pro 13-inch as my main setup. And there's a lot of reasons for it. One of the main reasons I moved the M1 Mac Mini is because it's small, it's compact, and I needed it over in my gaming setup to do my game streaming. It's more ideal for that. Why not just get another M1 Mac Mini to replace the old one to put in place in your editing setup? That was an option. I could have did that seamlessly and I would have saved money doing it that way. But there's a lot of conveniences to getting the laptop version of the M1 build, especially the MacBook Pro. Why not the Air? Simple as this, it's the fan. I want a fan. When components, especially the way that I push them, get hot, things happen and you don't want heat. Heat is not your friend when you're doing high-end editing and, you know, CPU performance and things like that. You want your device to maintain the proper temperatures. Granted, MacBook Air, absolutely phenomenal in the M1. That's the one that I haven't tried, and I might possibly try in the future. You never know, but the reason why I went M1 MacBook Pro is fan-based. Also, it's the MacBook Pro. I'm a pro machine user on Apple, so obviously this makes the most sense. But there's a lot of pluses to me getting this over the M1 Mac Mini. Let's start. The biggest one, the display. This comes with a built-in display. This is Apple's Retina display. This is a great display. This is Apple-ish display. This is Apple quality display that's attached to your machine for not that much of an up cost. So for those of you who may not have high-end, high-quality external monitors to plug an M1 Mac Mini into, you can start here. You got your monitor built in to your computer and you can start on this 13-inch display. Where the 13-inch display comes in for me, considering the fact that I do have high-end you know, ultra wide 5K, 2K monitors and so forth, is the fact that this creates a second display for me without adding extra clutter to the desk. Like literally my new desk setup is a clear bottom, which places this MacBook Pro, one cable that goes in, and then I have my Stream Deck, which I use for shortcuts in Final Cut Pro, off to the left, my mouse, and that's it on the bottom. I mean, like I do have like a tier thing where I got like storage and, you know, Thunderbolt 3 dock and audio equipment and stuff like that. But technically my space where this sits is literally this display, this, you know, laptop keyboard right here, which I'm using with the Touch ID. We'll talk about that later. A MX Master mouse, and then my Stream Deck. Phenomenal, absolutely minimalistic. And then here comes another point. I can unplug this and I can travel with this. I can take my main editing setup, all of my main hookups, my software, everything on the go with me. If I don't want to edit at my desk right there, I can sit right here and I can edit. I can talk to you and have my main setup right here. I can do live streams right here. I can do a lot of different things because now I am now portable. And it's the M1 build. This is not the Intel-based MacBook Pros of the past. Yes, it's a thing of the past with the loud fans, you know, the noisiness. Like literally, it's at this point in time, if you're looking for a new machine on the Apple platform, or if you're looking to get into Apple, go M1, period. And that's not me hyping it up and all that stuff. As you guys can see, I'm being very calm, straightforward in this video because I'm having a real authentic conversation with you guys based off my experience over these last 9 months. The Touch ID, you guys. I now have Touch ID. If you're like me, I use the passwords, things like that, Apple Pay, all of the above. The beauties of Touch ID and the security. Love it. That's built into this. Now my main editing setup has Touch ID. Granted, Apple did just release, let me grab it. Boom. If you guys haven't seen my unboxing, this is the Touch ID enabled Magic Keyboard, which you can get for any M1 Mac machine, which hence I grabbed that for my M1 Mac Mini to enable Touch ID, as well as if I wanted to just use this MacBook Pro in clamshell mode, which is the way that I use it if I want to have the M1 Mac Mini experience or whatever. If I just want it to be a computer and not a laptop, you can clamshell it and I can use this keyboard and I still get my Touch ID. That's clutch. Shout out to Apple for finally bringing this Touch ID to the masses. Well, the M1 masses. But inevitably, I also just wanted to use an M1 laptop. My previous MacBook Pros have all been Intel based. They all have been extremely heat driven. Like they just get so hot. Like the MacBook Pro 16-inch, I could be doing regular day-to-day tasks and that Intel based MacBook Pro heats up extremely. It's like a hot plate. It's ridiculous. You don't get that problem here on the M1 MacBook Pro at all. It's quiet. This is the biggest thing. This thing is so quiet. The M1 Mac Mini is quiet as well. This is the M1 Mac Mini with a display built in and portability. So why wouldn't I want those conveniences? It runs cooler, it's quieter, and honestly, overall, it's just a better machine than an Intel-based Mac at this point. Unless you have like an extremely high-end one, I can't rival that because this is just the base model M1. This is just the beginning M1. Now, granted, when the M1X comes out and you have higher GPU cores and higher CPU cores, yeah, a lot of those people who make those high-end purchases, excuse me, like I did with the iMac Pro and then the Mac Pros and things like that, that's when that market will get rocked. And literally the M1 and the ARM chip, you know, the Apple Silicon-based chips are just rocking the market right now. And literally I can wholeheartedly like recommend this M1 MacBook Pro, the M1 Mac Mini. I haven't used the M1 MacBook Air personally, but from what I know of M1, you should be able to use that thing and have a phenomenal experience depending on your use cases. But at the end of the day, this replacing my M1 Mac Mini was the plus, an upgrade, because now I have portability. I also have the convenience of a cleaner desk setup. Not that when I had the M1 Mac Mini, it wasn't as clean because all I had was the keyboard and stuff like that. But the convenience here is the extra display without having the actual big display. Like my desk is small that I'm using for editing now. I've downgraded. I'm trying to be a little bit more compact and minimal and focused over there. That desk is focused for editing. And then my big luxurious gaming and streaming setup over here is, you know, yeah, it's that. That's just where all of the craziness happens, all of the 3080s and high-end gaming builds. And then, you know, I got the M1 Mac Mini headlining that streaming setup. But I just want to tell you guys, like 9 months later, using M1 since the beginning, seeing all of the capabilities, like literally using base model M1s, not the top of the top. Granted, build your M1 to service your needs properly and also to service your budget. I use external fast storage for editing, and then I use external large storage for storage. I don't necessarily rely on the internal storage as much, but you might be different. So build your M1 machine accordingly. My whole point of me having this discussion and talking in this video is just to show you guys like real life usage of M1 and why I can move the M1 Mac Mini aside, get a M1 MacBook Pro and gain some pluses. I don't see any cons to using the MacBook Pro over the M1 Mac Mini. I just see pros. The other day my power went out, like it just flashed out and came back on, like, but I was in the middle of an export. Shout out to having an internal battery, because this just kept exporting while everything else cut off. If that was the M1 Mac Mini, I would have had to restart my exporting experience. But if you don't need the built-in display, if you don't have the budget to spend more for the M1 MacBook Pro, then stick with the M1 Mac Mini. But if you do have the budget and you do like the conveniences of the M1 MacBook Pro, I'm gonna recommend the M1 MacBook Pro. I love this machine. I can edit everything. I can do so much more. I'll fill you guys in with future videos. I'll show you guys like my setup, all of my accessories that I am using to make this be my main high-end video editing machine and more. Hit the subscribe button, smash that like button if you like the video. My name is CJ Unplugged, and join the Unplugged family. I got a lot of really dope content coming you guys' way. A lot of changes on the channel, but also a lot of consistency and videos. Peace.
I put in work, you know I'm up to get it. Early bird gets the worm and the Yankee fitted. Like whoa, bags under my eyes and you know, won't complain, I'm tired, I'm on go. For that grip, 10 toes till they swole. For that grip, 10 toes till they swole. Remember those days, those L's, I couldn't sleep right now. I get paid, vacay, I'm staying B-side. Breaking the blues over steak, I gotta eat right. You could be my peace sign. I don't need that energy around me.